I feel like it's probably close enough to 3:45 for me to go ahead and get started. I generally have to place my phone like far away from me when I'm presenting because if it buzzes in my pocket, I get really distracted. I'm like, oh, what's going on the internet? And I'm like, no, focus. You're giving a presentation. So this presentation is titled A Developer's Primer to Managing Developers. You are currently at DrupalCon Austin. The year is 2014, and this is room E. If none of those things match your expectations, please feel free to get up and leave and go find a different session or a different year or a different conference. I will not be offended. My name is Joe Shindelar. I'm known on the internet as eojthebrave, on Twitter, IRC, Drupal.org, pretty much anything that was invented after 1995 that you can create a user account for. I have registered eojthebrave. So that's where you can find me. If you've got questions and you'd like to tweet them at me or just to come and find me and ask questions after the session as well. I currently work for a company called Lullabot. Lullabot is a development company. We do development, design, consulting, a whole bunch of other stuff, primarily focused on Drupal, but we also dabble in other technologies as well. Really whatever works to solve the problems that our clients have. At Lullabot, my primary role is as part of the Drupalize.me team. Drupalize.me is a web service for training videos, and my role on that team is sort of multifaceted. I'm both the senior developer on the team, so I'm responsible for maintaining the infrastructure that keeps our website up and running, and I'm also one of the trainers, so I help to create the videos that are on the site that people come and watch on our site. So any given week, that responsibility varies from sometimes I'm a developer for 5 hours and a trainer for 35, and sometimes I'm a developer for 35 and a trainer for 5. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also supposed to tell you that, Lullabot's hiring, so if you want a job, stop by the booth. Lullabot is having a party on Wednesday night at a place called the Handlebar. No, the Handle Bar, not handlebar, but handle space bar. It's really confusing. It's apparently 5 minutes away from here. I'm sure if you stop by the booth, somebody will give you way more information than I could. And in general, if you have questions afterwards, I will probably, right after the session, head down to our booth and hang out there so people can stop by and ask me questions and chat. So that's kind of like where I work, but a little bit more about me and kind of what's going to happen in this presentation. I'm going to spend the next 4 slides I'm going to use to set up the context for this presentation. We're going to talk about who I am and who you are and why we're talking about this stuff. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of slides in which I talk about various process things and experiences that I've had over the last couple of years of being a developer. On slide 33, we're going to take a break for cookies. And then we'll continue for a few more slides until the end where we'll have, hopefully, if I go quick enough, time for a Q&A. There's like 38 slides, so that's like roughly a slide per minute, and then we get like 10 minutes to have Q&A at the end. We'll see how it goes. I'm a developer. I've been doing Drupal development for probably about 10 years at this point, and I'm going to momentarily pause because this is not showing my presenter notes. There we go. Confirmed. 10 years is what I wrote. So I've been doing web development for probably about 12 years, but focused on Drupal for the last 10. During that time, I've worked at a number of different agencies. I've also worked as a freelancer. I started out at a small company in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that was actually a print and publication design firm and didn't do development at all. And over time, we started doing web development. I transitioned into being the lead of the web development team there. That team grew. I eventually needed to move on to other things. I did freelance for a while, ultimately ended up at Lullabot. I've worked on teams from just myself, being like the project manager and the lead developer and the junior developer and the QA team, to teams where there's multiple project managers, 30 plus developers, things like Drupal.org where there's like thousands of developers. I would consider that a team that I've worked on as well. During that time, I've never been a project manager before. I don't particularly have a lot of interest in being a project manager. I really like the day-to-day, like sitting down and writing code. I definitely have those afternoons where I just I want to bang out some code and be done with my day and have somebody else kind of telling me what to do. But I've also often found myself in like roles, leadership roles on the teams that I work on. usually as a result of having been the first person on the team, and then just by default, you're there for a couple of years, and now you're the person that knows the most, so now you're the leader, even if you don't want to be the leader. But as a result of that, I feel like I've gained a lot of experience of what it means to be a leader on a team. And I've also worked with a bunch of project managers over the last couple of years. And those experiences have been both good and bad. This presentation is about trying to translate those experiences into information for project managers and to give them a better sense of when you're talking to a developer, what are they hearing you say? When I first kind of conceived of this presentation, I thought, this is going to be a presentation where I'm going to stand up at the front of the room, and the room's going to be full of project managers, and I'm going to tell them, if you want me to do things, this is how you get me to do them. But the more I thought about it, I realized that the messages that I had to give were relevant for project managers, but also for anyone that's part of a team. Because if you're part of a team, it's important for you as a team player to understand how everyone else on your team wants to be project managed, so that you can help them accomplish their goals, so that you know how to ask them when you need help or when you need them to do something. And so I started to realize that this talk was it's for project managers, but it's also for anyone that's part of a team. So this is what I'm going to talk about, roughly in this order, hopefully. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about things that motivate developers. What are those things that make you get out of bed and go over to your computer and actually turn it on and start working? I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about the process that we use for doing development on the Drupalize Me team, mostly because it's the thing that I'm the most familiar with, because I've spent a lot of time on this in the last couple of years. But also because I feel like the process that we have currently ends up being kind of an aggregate of all of the knowledge that I've gained and everyone else on the team has gained over our 10 years or whatever it is as being developers. So I've got some stories that I'll share, and then hopefully lessons based on those things that we've tried and what's worked and what hasn't worked. And then I've got some other random tidbits that we'll fill in there. That's right about the same time as the cookie break. And then, of course, there will be a recap at the end in which I'll tell you everything that I just told you. So, last thing, setting context, because I will probably interchange these words and not even realize I'm doing it. When I say the word ticket or to-do or task or probably any other set of words, what I'm really referring to is some kind of actionable item that someone else on the team or myself or a project manager could assign to me to do, assuming that it has some maybe defined amount of time that will take to do it, and it definitely is something that it's the thing I can cross off my list at the end of the day when I'm done. So, all right, so that's all of our context. So I think it makes sense to start out by talking a little bit about motivation, because motivation is it's the thing that gets us up in the morning and gets us to go to our computer and turn it on and select a ticket to work on. It's the reason that we kind of do our jobs and do a good job of doing it. And so, as a developer, it's important to me that the project managers I work with and anyone else on my team that I work with understands what the things are that motivate me, so that, in a sense, they can use that as a lever to manipulate me into doing a good job or doing the tickets that they want me to do and I don't feel like doing. But really, if you understand what motivates me, that's your leverage to get me to do something. And for me, this is kind of it's not the things on the motivational poster that say, aspire, and then there's a picture of a mountain, and you assume, oh, I'm supposed to aspire to climb to the top of that mountain. This is more like the things that motivate me to not fall asleep at my desk. So for the most part, they're pretty straightforward, and I think that they'll apply to most people, but these are my motivations. So remember that, and hopefully this will be an exercise in getting people to sort of think about and identify the things that motivate them as well. Excuse me. So, for me, hands down, the thing that motivates me to do work and to do good work is having fun doing those things. If I'm given a task that I think is going to be fun to do, I guarantee you I will complete it, I'll do a good job of completing it, I'll probably exceed your expectations, and I'll be smiling when I'm done with it. I think about this and I go, when was the last time you heard one of your coworkers say, oh man, I'm so excited and proud of that really boring thing I just worked on? It doesn't really happen. But what's cool is, for me, and probably for everybody, the things that we consider to be fun are going to be different. So in a team where you've got multiple people, understanding what each person thinks is fun is important. I might find, what do I find fun? I do not find recurring billing systems fun. However, I do find them challenging, which we'll talk about in a minute. I find it really fun to be able to solve tasks that I can see have a direct impact on Drupalize Me's customers. So when somebody can go, oh man, I'm really glad that I can add this to my queue now. That's a fun thing for me to work on. So number one motivation for me is I want to work on things that are fun because I'll do a better job at it if I think it's fun. But I can also pretty easily change the word fun with a couple of other words. And I think that this holds true for a lot of developers, not necessarily everyone, but in the years that I've been doing development, I've also been in a lot of interviews to like hire new developers or to be hired as a developer. And they always ask you that question like, what do you want out of this job? And I feel like 90% of the time when I'm talking to other developers, they say things like, I want to work somewhere that challenges me to do a better job. Or challenges me to learn new things. I want to learn new things. Like, as a developer, I think this is a common, especially web developers, when a field that's moving so quickly, we get excited by being able to learn about all the new things that are going on. And when we get the opportunity to do so, that can be really motivating. So for a project manager or for someone else that's on my team and is kind of asking me to do things, if you can understand the things that I find to be challenging or fun, that's a lever that you can use to help get me to do those. But you can also understand that I like working on a challenge, and I may encounter tasks that I'll initially push back on, and I'll say, I don't think I can do that. That's kind of outside of my realm of what I'm familiar or comfortable with. And I really appreciate when other people that I work with push me to try to accomplish those things, even if I might think I'm not capable of it. And a lot of times, those end up being some of the most rewarding things for me to work on in the end, because I've not only had fun, I've exceeded my own expectations, and that's a really motivating feeling. The other thing that really motivates me, and this is kind of recursive, like the desire to do good work motivates me to do good work. I really want to build awesome things. And I think this is also true of a lot of developers. We get excited when we get to kick ass and when we get to do our best work. I live in Minneapolis currently, and I live about 2 miles away from my mom. And it's awesome because a couple of times a month I can go over to my mom's house and she'll make dinner. And I can hang out and have dinner, free dinner. It gets really cold in Minneapolis in the winter. And so it's even better when I can go over to my mom's house and have dinner in the winter and she makes soup. And my mom makes the best potato leek soup you've ever had. It's awesome. Hands down, the best. When I left Minneapolis during college, I left for a couple of years, I moved away. I started to get homesick, so I called my mom and I asked her for her potato leek soup recipe. And she sent me the recipe. I went to the store, I bought all the ingredients, I tried to make the potato leek soup. And I made it. I followed the recipe, I crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's, and I did everything I was supposed to. And the soup was okay, but it wasn't awesome. So then I go back and I have soup, and I go over to my mom's and she makes the soup again, and I'm asking her, I don't get it. How come when I follow your recipe, my soup never turns out as good as the soup that you made? And her response, it's like, do you have like a secret ingredient you put into this? Do you have some kind of metal in your pans that isn't in my pans? What's going on here? And that response that my mom gives is, well, I put love into the soup that I'm making. And for me, I want to be able to do that with the code that I'm writing. I want to feel like I'm loving the thing that I'm working on, because if I can do that, I'm going to kick ass at it. And so as someone else on my team, and especially as a project manager, it really helps if you're in a position to prevent me from having to cut corners and make it so that I have the time and the space to put that extra ingredient into all of the work that I'm doing. I totally recognize that this isn't always possible. Like, we have deadlines, we have obligations that we have to meet. But whenever it is possible, it helps if I have the space to do things the right way the first time and not have to go, here's my quick fix. I hope to come back and fix this later on. It's going to be great when I do it the right way next time, because I'll never do it again. So I like to work on things that I want to work on, and I want to do a good job working on them. Of course, like I said earlier, not all developers are created equal. Each of us finds different things to be fun or challenging. Each of us are motivated to do awesome things for different reasons. But all of us do have motivations. And it's important to understand what our motivations are and what the motivations of other people are on our team are as well. So I encourage you guys to take a minute either now or at the end of the day or next week. This is your one and only homework assignment from this presentation. Spend some time thinking about what motivates you, but also spend some time thinking about what motivates everybody else on your team too. Try to write those things down. For me, this was an interesting exercise to try to write down what are like the 3 things that really motivate me to do awesome work. And then it got really hard when I had to go through everyone else on my team and try to write down the 3 things that motivated them to do good work. I couldn't do it without asking them. So this is where the second part of this homework is. Once you've made that list, or once you've started to identify for yourself what makes you want to do awesome work as a developer, you need to tell everybody that you work with, because they probably don't know. I mean, it's one thing for me to say, I like to do things that are fun. And it's a totally another thing for me to identify what is fun, or what I find to be fun. The more that my coworkers know about that, though, the more likely it is that they'll be able to put me in a position where I'm working on those types of things. I feel like, how's the saying go? It's admitting that you have an addiction is the first step to solving that addiction. Admitting that you have motivations is the first step to being able to be motivated. Or as Sir Michael Philip Jagger likes to say, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need. To me, this is that like, yep, I know that even if you know all of the things that motivate me to do good work, I'm still going to have to fix typos once in a while, even if it's not fun. Like, I'm an adult. I know what it takes to have a product, what it takes to launch a website, and I'll get those things done. But if I can identify for the people that I'm working with what's fun for me, and they're put into a scenario of all other things equal, they've got 2 tasks, and they need to pick which of those 2 to assign me, why not assign me the one that I'm going to find fun and assign somebody else on the team the one that they're going to find challenging and as a learning opportunity? And you can't do that if you don't know what motivates the people on your team. Water break. Okay, so motivation. That's kind of a little bit about the things that motivate me, an encouragement to think about the things that motivate you. I want to spend some time now talking about the development process that we use at Drupalize Me currently and used to use, and how our ability to spend some time thinking about the things that motivate ourselves and everybody else on our team has allowed us to adapt our process in such a way that we can hopefully better accommodate people's motivation. I'm going to talk about these processes at a pretty high level, and then I'll spend some time talking about particular change or specific changes that we've made to our process, and not so much like the change itself, but more the lessons that we learned by making those changes. So background, let's say, step back a year ago. 1 year ago, Drupalize Me, this is kind of how we did work on the Drupalize Me website. Our development cycle looked like this. We have roughly a 2 to 6 person development team, depending on the week, and people's availability during the week. Each developer on the team also usually has a different number of hours depending on the week. Like I said, for me, sometimes I have 5 hours for training and 35 for development, and sometimes I have 35 for development and 5 hours for training. It goes back and forth. In that scenario, we ended up with a ticket tracking system. We use a ticket tracking system called Unfuddle. Unfuddle allowed us to group tickets together into various... Unfuddle calls them milestones. I'm going to just call them big buckets of tickets. What we did was we had a big bucket of tickets, the backlog, so just one giant backlog of the 800 plus things that we needed to accomplish on our site. We had 2-week sprints. During a 2-week sprint, we would create a new bucket. The project manager would pick what I'm pretty sure was just a bunch of random tickets out of the backlog and put them into this new bucket and then assign them to people based on, well, Joe's got 5 hours, so I'll give him the one that I, the project manager, think will take 5 hours. And Kyle's got 35 hours, so here's a few tickets that'll match 35 hours. We'd go to work. At the end of the 2 weeks, I'm expected to have completed everything that was assigned to me in the sprint bucket. We have a review. Usually in the review, we realize we only accomplished half of the things that we had planned on, and half of the things that we did accomplish weren't done as well as we could have done them. And then we'd launch that version of the site. And it worked. And this is a pretty common way of attacking that problem. I'm a project manager, I've got a bunch of developers, I need to give them tasks to work on. And it certainly, I'm not trying to say that this is a bad way of doing things by any means. I'm just kind of identifying, a year ago, this is what we were doing. I'm going to tell you more about how we do this now, and then talk about some of those changes that we've made and why we made them. So, last week at Drupalize Me, when we wanted to work on development tasks, this is how it worked. Same team, we've got roughly 2 to 6 people working on development, varying number of hours. Instead of organizing all of our tickets into one giant bucket of everything and then a smaller bucket of the things we're working on right now, we've organized all of our tickets into big picture goals based on conversations that we as a team have had about the project that we're working on, where we would like to see it be in the future, how we think we might get there, in which tickets sort of go in those specific buckets. Each of those buckets at this point has somewhere between 2 and 20 tickets in it, depending on what the goal is. Instead of this scenario where the project manager assigned each of us X number of tickets and we were expected to accomplish them by the end of the week, we actually let all of our developers just choose any ticket from any bucket that they want to work on at any given time. They still have X number of hours, and they're expected to fill that number of hours during the week, but they can choose the task that they want to work on. We do 1 week sprints now instead of 2. So it basically works out to, during the week, I can choose anything I want to work on. Once I've completed it, I mark it as resolved. It goes through a QA process. If it's been through QA by the end of the week, it will be live on our site next week. In this scenario, amongst other things, I feel like this has allowed project managers to focus more on helping me as a developer remove the things that are blocking me from getting work done, helping me to work on tickets that I find challenging or motivating, and spending less time going, do you think this ticket's going to take 5 hours or 15 hours? And should I put it in the bucket this week or next week? Amongst a bunch of other things. So that's kind of our current process. Of course, this is our process. And I think it's important to recognize that every team's process is going to be a little bit different because the people that make up a team are always different. And the motivations of the people on that team are always different. It's really easy for us to fall into this look, somebody wrote down their ideal process on a blog post, and I've read it 3 times. That must be what our team needs to do too. When in reality, you probably want to do most of that with a couple of minor variations that make the process right for your team. The other thing is that process should be fluid. You should allow your process to change over time, and we continue to allow ours to change over time. A year ago, the process that I described that we had been using a year ago, that was also the process that we had been using the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. And we had kind of once, when we started working together as a team, identified, well, this is how things should work. And we wrote it down, and we continued to do it that way forever, because that's what was written down. Eventually, we realized, it's probably okay for us to make some changes to that process. And they started out really small, and they continue to be small changes, but they're incremental, and over time they add up. And we start to get this process that works for all of us. And what we found out is that, we started to understand what motivated people on our team to do good work, and what motivated, each other to do good work. And we realized that the process that we put in place and that we use to do our work should also facilitate us doing good work. It should facilitate the things that motivate us so that we get to work on the tickets that we want to. Our process should motivate us to do good work, and it shouldn't hinder us and make us feel inefficient or bogged down or frustrated that it's Wednesday and it's the third day of a 2-week sprint, but the project manager hasn't yet put anything into my bucket, so I've just wasted 2 days not doing anything because they're still trying to load this sprint up, or whatever the case may be. So process should be fluid, and you should adapt it to meet the needs of your team. Our changes started out really small. The first one that I can remember changing was actually a 2-word change to the label of a bucket of tickets in Unfuddle. And all of a sudden it was this like opening the floodgates, and we were like, holy cow, we can change things? And changing things mean we work better together as a team. So the example here is we had all of our tickets in this giant backlog, and we would pull tickets from that backlog and work on them during the sprint. The backlog at the time was named MVP, or minimum viable product. And the idea was, once we had cleared all of the tickets out of this backlog, we would have a version of our site that we could launch. There were like 400 some tickets in this MVP backlog. And it would play out in that I would always be trying to add more tickets to the MVP backlog, because I was like, I don't want to launch a site that doesn't have search working. I don't want to launch a site that has a regression from the thing that we've already got. Like, I don't want to cut these corners. And the project manager going, we don't need this one, we don't need this one, we can do this one later, it'll be just fine. And it was really frustrating for me because I wanted to do good work, but I felt like I couldn't, because all I was working towards was getting the minimum done. So we changed the label of that bucket from minimum viable product to launch blockers. That was it. We just labeled the bucket differently, and we said, this is the list of tickets that we need to solve before we can launch the version of our site. And it had this huge impact on the morale of our team. We went from being like, oh man, this sucks. Like, I'm so excited about launching this thing that I'm not excited about, to, oh man, we've only got 20 tickets left in the launch blocker backlog. We're getting really close. Let's get this done and we can launch this version of our site. And it still played out the same. I still tried to add tickets to the launch blocker backlog. The PM still, as far as I could tell, randomly threw tickets away. But it worked out in the end, and we were all more motivated to do good work. That simple change also led us to realize that it was okay for us to change our process too, and that maybe we should reevaluate the way that we were doing other things and see if there were other gains that we could get from looking at our process. So we had a team retreat. We didn't really get together to talk about our development process, but we ended up spending an entire day or more talking about our development process while we were there. And during the team retreat, I proposed, what would it look like if we allowed everyone on the team to just choose what they wanted to work on when they wanted to work on it? And I was like, this is my dream world, right? I get to show up on Monday, I get to pick whatever ticket sounds fun, I get to work on it. If it's not fun, I'll just stop working on it and work on something else. This is going to be awesome. And this will allow me to meet all of my motivations because I know what motivates me. I also felt like this scenario would allow for me to have a higher satisfaction in the work that I was doing, because it's that whole made with love aspect. I would get to be proud of the things that I was working on because I picked things that were important to me. And I also felt that this was going to help facilitate better communication amongst our team. And this was maybe a little bit naive, but in the end it did pan out. But initially I was like, yeah, it'll be great. We'll just have to talk more because we'll need to know what other people are working on, and we'll have better communication as a result. Turns out it's actually really hard to talk about chaos, which is kind of where some of this other stuff comes in. The pushback on this, of course, was as the project manager, or as the product owner especially, there are things that are important to me or that I know need to get done in order for this project to be successful. And I need some ability to tell you, you need to do this thing this week, because if you don't, you're blocking Justin from doing the thing that he needs to do. But we talked about this a bunch, and we came up with some ways to resolve that problem. We ended up with what we call roadmaps. Really what the roadmap is it's a document that defines our team's goals for the next quarter. So we set quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 goals. And these goals are really big picture. They're things like, we would like to improve the experience for people browsing our library page. Or we would like the ability to sell gift certificates on our website. But we spent some time as a team kind of going through that exercise of saying, these are all the things that are important to us. Our roadmap allows for anyone to write down any goal. And there's basically a sandbox at the bottom. And you can say, man, this is something that's really important to me, and I want to talk about it with the team in the future. We've also got our current set of goals, which is these are the things that we're going to work on for this quarter. This was cool because it allowed us to talk together more about the ideal product, the ideal end result for this project, and what each of our individual goals was. This also ended up having the sort of byproduct of providing a lot of structure for me randomly choosing tickets from this bucket of I can work on anything to now I've kind of identified, like, as a team, these are our goals. And if we want to meet those goals, as an adult and as a good team player, I should probably pick tickets that are related to those specific goals. I don't have to. Like, if it's Tuesday and I really don't want to work on our billing system, I can pick a different ticket and it's fine. But for the most part, I'm happy to pick those tickets that will help the team accomplish its goals. And I'm still getting to identify the tickets that are fun for me. So I'm picking from maybe a smaller bucket, but I'm still picking tickets that are a good fit for me. It also provided kind of like a motivational rallying point for our team. It was the ability to like get everybody excited about a particular thing. And it was amazing the amount of efficiency we would have when we recognized, like, our goal as a team right now is to redesign the page that has the video player on it. And everyone would be like, yeah, that's awesome. I can see how this is going to be better for our customers. Let's all get really excited about that. The roadmaps are created by our whole team, so they're not just the product manager or the project manager saying, these are the goals for the team. You have to do these things, whether you'd like to or not. We actually spend time each quarter kind of talking about the goals that are already on the list, deciding for right now, these are the ones that we'd like to move to the top and have be our focus. This worked out really well, too, because back before Christmas, one of the goals on our list was we'd like to be able to sell gift certificates. And as a team, we went, if we're going to be able to sell gift certificates, we might as well have this, or it would be better if we could have this feature accomplished and usable before Christmas. So we very quickly bumped that goal up to the top of the list. But everyone was on board with that because we all recognized the importance of being able to sell gift certificates before Christmas and not just having this be something that we launched somewhere in the April of 2014 and we were like, look, you can get an Easter gift certificate. These roadmaps and defining what our goals as a team were allowed us to sort of channel that self-assignment of tickets. And in a weird way has really allowed the project manager to, again, leverage me into doing the tickets that they need to get done. But they're doing it not by saying, you have to do this thing. They're doing it by saying, this is important to our project, this is important to our product, and as a team, we've identified this as a goal that we can all rally around and accomplish. And I go, oh man, I can totally help with that. I'll choose that ticket and that ticket. And then the project manager goes, that's what I thought. As a result of this, some other things that we've gained from having this, allowing people to choose whatever ticket they want to work on from the pool of, we've basically narrowed it from like 800. By setting goals, we narrow it from like 800 to like 10. But I'm still choosing what I want to work on, right? And I'm totally that rebel. As soon as my mom is like, you can't go on a bike ride, I'm like, oh, you want to bet? I'm going on a bike ride. As soon as the project manager is like, you need to work on this ticket, I'm like, I don't want to work on that ticket. But if I'm like, I'd like to work on this one, and the project manager goes, that's fine, it needs to get done. Like, that's a whole different mentality for me. We've ended up with tickets that have way better descriptions. And the reason they have better descriptions is because the person writing the ticket needs to write it in such a way that you define not only what the problem is, but why solving this problem is important to us as a team, so that someone else on the team that's capable of solving the ticket or like resolving that task will go, oh yeah, I can see how this is important and choose it. So we write our tickets now with a whole section dedicated to the problem and the motivation for solving this problem. It's pretty cool. It also gives us It also gives us a much better understanding as a team of what our overall priorities are. We've spent some time talking about them. We've written down these goals. We now know that, like, as a team, our goal right now is to launch the gift certificate feature in time for people to purchase gift certificates by Christmas. We also learned that, each of us on the team are responsible adults too. And even though I'm in this world where I can choose whatever ticket I want to, I recognize that sometimes things just need to get done. Like, sometimes we just need to fix the typo. Sometimes there's a PHP error and I just need to fix it so that our site works. And it's been a really rewarding experience to have my managers recognize that level of responsibility in me as a developer to say, you can choose whatever you want to, and we recognize that if something is really important, that you'll make sure it gets done. Because I think we all know that, we can identify what's important to getting this project completed or to keeping our website up and running. And if you can't, you should probably have a discussion with your team about what's important and how to keep your website up and running. All of this kind of resulted in us learning more about how we as a team work together and what our vision was. And as a result, we ended up building a much better product and being more successful together. I like this quote. It says, "Great teams, it turns out, begin with a shared vision, a unified, clearly articulated belief about the software they are creating." And I think it's true. You think about even a project like Drupal, it's really successful because the people that are working on it are excited about it. They have, to some extent, a unified vision of what Drupal will be if content management system is a vision. But being able to articulate what you're building. What this allows for is me to get excited and to make sure that we're building a more polished thing together. This whole idea of allowing people to choose the things that they want to work on, I found out after we kind of switched to this, I was like, oh man, this is awesome. We're totally innovative. Not really. Turns out people have been doing this for years, and it just took us a while to catch on. One example that I came across of this was the Multiple Alternatives Program, or MAP, which is a program that Oracle used to have. I don't know if they do anymore, but I think it really kind of helps to illustrate how these things could work. Oracle, big software company, they're always trying to hire the best developers in the world. So one of the things that they would do is they would go around to all of the top computer science universities, and they would talk to all of the top graduates from each of those classes, and they would offer them jobs. And the job description you got was, come work at Oracle. Not come work at Oracle and be a web developer, or come work at Oracle and be a DBA. It was just, we'd like you to have a job at Oracle. And as part of that job, you get to spend your first 2 weeks walking around, meeting the people that work here, figuring out what all the projects are that people are working on, figuring out what sounds fun to you, and then you can decide which of those projects you want to work on and what you want your job to be. And this worked out presumably really great for them because they were able to attract top talent by saying, you get to do whatever you want because we like to do whatever we want. But they got to have all of that top talent in-house now working on, at least something at Oracle and not something at one of their competitors. And I also found out there's actually a lot of books about this stuff too. And it turns out project management is actually a thing. And when the project manager told me, yeah, this is important, and my role is to assign you tickets, I was like, okay. So there are other resources as well. This is the part where I kind of go more into the additional things that we've learned from changing these processes. We changed from 2-week sprints to 1-week sprints. Initially, we just did this because I really had this idea as a developer that I needed to have continuous integration because this is a thing that everyone was talking about, and I wanted to set up Jenkins, and when I committed code, I wanted it automatically deployed to our site because that was going to be awesome. We don't actually have that, but we do have 1-week sprints instead of 2-week sprints. And what I learned from this was that I didn't really care that much about continuous integration. It sounds nice, but I love the fact that I can more quickly get the work that I'm doing in front of people who care about the work that I'm doing. The 2-week sprint had this byproduct of you solve a ticket on Monday, the first Monday of a 2-week sprint. No one else other than the people doing QA are going to see the results of that for a minimum of 2 weeks. More likely 2.5 or 3 after it's gone through all of the QA and regression testing. And it's frustrating because, I deal with customer support on our site a lot, and I would often get these questions that are like, oh, how come this button doesn't work? And I would go look, and I'd be like, yeah, you're right, it doesn't work. And I'm thinking, that would be a really easy fix. But instead of just fixing it, I'd have to write a ticket, and I'd have to put the ticket in the minimum viable product backlog, and then the project manager would be like, oh, we don't need this ticket. And then I'd be like, it's so easy, it would take me 10 minutes, and it would take somebody else 10 minutes to do the QA on it. And now it's 6 months later, I'm getting back to the customer and going, I'd like to inform you that we have made it so you can click on this link. And they're like, oh, I'd like to inform you that I canceled my subscription 3 months ago. Now, I can, on Friday, say, oh man, this sucks. I can fix that really quick. I can go and write the ticket, and then I can choose the ticket, and then I can solve the problem, and I can commit the code, and on Monday it'll get into QA, and somebody will QA it, and it'll only take like 10 minutes because they're going, oh yeah, it works when you click on it. And then on Wednesday it's live on our site, and I can write back to our customer, and I can say, hey, thanks for pointing that out. We went ahead and fixed it. And they're like, oh, that's awesome. This is totally solving the problem that I was having now. Thank you. And we've made our customers even happier. We also learned that sometimes changes to your process aren't always pretty. We made some changes that we kind of went, we thought this was a good idea, but it's not going to work as well as we thought. The whole like choose your own tickets was this initially. It was like, here's your giant bucket of tickets. And us developers were like, I'll do this one and that one. And there was no cohesive like getting anything done. So we allowed our process to be fluid and adapt. And we started adding things like the roadmap to address that. So be aware that when you change your process, it might not always work out the way that you thought it would. But if you're willing to allow for change, you can always revert that thing that didn't work out and try something different. So what we learned from, changing our processes and talking about motivation, I learned that as a developer, I want to do my best work, and that as a project manager or someone I'm working with, I want you to facilitate me in any way that you can to allow me to do my best work. I'm more productive, more motivated, more excited, I have more fun, and I'm more challenged when I get to pick the tickets that I'm working on because I know what I find fun and challenging and motivating and engaging and all of those other things that motivate me. We learned that as a team, the more that the developers on the team understand what the mission is of our whole team, the more we have a unified vision, the better we can do at helping achieve that unified vision. We learned that process should be fluid and that it's okay for us to make changes to our process and that we don't have to get stuck in this, the book on Scrum says you have to do it this way. We will only ever do it that way. Well, we can make slight variations to that and it's fine. We also learned that I like cookies because I've had at least 2 slides that contain cookies. A few other things. Change your process and then document those changes to your process. Especially project managers. I'm a developer. I understand APIs. I know how to read API documentation. I know, if I need to ask a question of Drupal, this is the function that I call to ask that question, and this is the format that I expect the result to come back in. It's nice if I can have that same sort of process, or that same level of understanding of the process that we're using as a development team. Project managers, think of your documentation as sort of like the API that you want developers to use to interact with you. Again, process should be fluid, which means you need to keep your documentation up to date. This is true of development documentation too, right? How many times have you tried to query Twitter's API and they haven't updated the documentation yet, and you're like, nope, that didn't work. Nope, that didn't work. I'm just going to throw things at this black box and see what comes back. If your process is the same way, it's kind of ineffective. If I have to go to my project manager and just kind of throw things at them and say can I get the answer I want? How about if I do this? How about if I do that? Not very helpful. Having good documentation helps improve the communication between me and the people that I'm working with. Because I know who to ask questions to, and I know how to ask those questions, and I know when to ask those questions, and I know when to expect a response to those questions, and I know what format the response is going to be in. And so in a lot of ways, us taking the time to step back and go, we should probably write this down and codify it, really allowed for us to have better communication as a team. It also makes it easier for someone that's new to the team to communicate with everyone else on the team. Because they can say, this is how as a team, you guys already work together, and I can understand that because I can read the documentation. I don't have to just start throwing things at a black box and see what comes back. Sort of off on a tangent here. Now we're kind of going from the things that were process related to things that I've learned by working in this new process with various teammates and project managers. As a developer, context switching is really complicated. The whole somebody pings you in IRC and they're like, hey, I've got a quick question for you. And I'm like, okay. I'd like to know if this thing is important. You're like, I don't know if it's important. let me go find out if it's important. And then 10 minutes later, your response is, no, it's not really important. I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. And I get back to what I was doing before, and I'm like halfway through a line of code. I'm like, I don't remember what I was doing. So now I've got to spend 15 minutes figuring out what I was doing by rereading the ticket and all of that stuff. Context switching is hard. I taught a workshop once with one of my coworkers, Jeff Eaton, and we were teaching people about the features module. Really, we were teaching people about the concept of deployment in Drupal, and we were using the features module as an example. And we knew that inevitably people were going to ask us, how do you deploy content? And we were going to have to say, oh, it's Drupal, you don't. But we didn't want to say that in this workshop, and we couldn't come up with a way to get people to really make this easy for people. And so Jeff's solution was insert a slide with a picture of cookies. And I was like, what is this going to do? And he says, oh, it'll be great because we'll ask everybody to, context switch. We'll bring up cookies, we'll tell some random story, and then we'll come back to the next slide, and we'll have just totally skipped the part about content deployment. And I'm like, that's fucking brilliant. So we're in this workshop, and the slide comes up right when he switches to that slide, and it's like this picture of a cookie and a hand pointing in this direction, and it says, cookies! The hotel catering staff walks into the room with a big plate of cookies for our afternoon break, and it just worked out perfect. Not planned, but it worked out perfect. So we go and we have a 15-minute cookie break, and we come back, and the next slide that Jeff has is something totally unrelated to content deployment, and we just pick up from there and move on. At the end, we said, oh, sorry, we tricked you guys. This is really hard. But seriously, context switching is hard. Who here remembers whether or not the slide before the one with cookies on it had a period at the end of the title? Right? Context switching is hard. And the only way that I can know is to go back to that slide and reread it and figure it out. This has resulted in us starting to come up with what I would like to dub the emergency classification system. One of the things that we deal with a lot is someone else is doing support. They ping me in IRC and they say, one of our customers just contacted us and they said that this isn't working. Is this important? Do we need to fix this right now? And I go, I don't know if we need to fix it right now or not. But let me go find out, and I'll tell you if we need to fix this right now. And now I'm in it, and I'm halfway into the code, and I go, well, this isn't really important, but I'm already here, so I might as well fix it. So I fix that thing, and now it's the next day, and I'm finally back to what I was working on before. And the only thing I have to remind me of what I was working on before is the fact that I have a dirty working tree in Git. And I'm like, I must have been doing something. So we started to talk more about what are the scenarios in which a project manager should ask me to context switch to solve a problem? For us, right now, this definition basically boils down to things that we would consider a hotfix for our site. So something isn't working, we need to fix it right away. And for us, the definition of hotfix is basically, would you ask me to leave the bar on Friday afternoon during happy hour to fix this problem? If you would, this is an emergency and we should deal with it. If it can wait till Monday, don't send me an email till Monday. It'll be fine. There's lots of ways to think about this problem, but I would encourage you as a team, as a project manager, to think about when you're going to interrupt what your developers are doing and why you're going to interrupt them. And as a developer, to talk to your project managers about the things that are interrupting you that maybe don't need to. Because I think a really good project manager, for me as a developer, sort of acts as an abstraction layer between me and the work that I need to be getting done and all of the things that are happening around me. As a developer, I've been hired to write code and solve these problems. And I shouldn't be having to solve all kinds of other, not necessarily non-code related problems, but kind of tangential problems. And for me, a good project manager is someone that can identify those things before they're put on my plate so that I don't have to context switch and deal with them, that they're just handled for me so I can continue to do the work that I'm doing. My example here is a couple of years ago, I was working on a top secret project at Lullabot, and three of us were flown out to Lullabot's offices in Providence, Rhode Island to have a week-long sprint. It was actually a 3-day sprint to work on this project. They fly us out to Providence. Lullabot's got this brand new office in Providence, so we're going to go check it out. This is going to be the first sprint that we have there. We show up at the office on Monday morning, ready to sprint, and we walk into the office, and it's empty. There's no chairs, there's no tables, there's nothing in this office. So instead of sprinting and writing code and getting the things done that we were brought there to do, we end up going to IKEA instead. And we buy a bunch of tables, well, we buy a table and a bunch of chairs, and we bring them back, and then we spend the afternoon assembling them. And now it's like 3 in the afternoon, and I'm not going to start anything new because it's 3, so I'm going to go to the bar and have a beer instead. So we go to the bar and we have a beer, and then we go to the hotel and we go to sleep, and then we get up in the morning, we go back to the office. It's Tuesday morning, we're in the office, we've got this big list of things that we have identified that we're going to accomplish during this sprint. I pull out my computer, I turn it on, there's no internet. Like, how am I going to do anything on a Drupal project without internet? So instead of getting down to work, we go to the mall, we go to the Clear store, we buy some internet. We're at the mall already. My coworker's like, I kind of wanted a new phone. So we go to the AT&T store. He buys a new phone. I'm like, well, we might as well get lunch. So we get lunch. Then we go back, and we're at the office. We open up our list, and we're like, all right, we can get connected to the internet so we can see what our list is. And by the end of the day, we've basically gotten that list written down on the whiteboard, and that's about it. And we go to the bar, we have a drink, we go to the hotel, we go to sleep, we get up the next morning, we come back to work, and now it's Wednesday of a 3-day sprint, and we finally get to start working on the things that we came here to work on. But if somebody had thought of those things ahead of time and realized, like, I really don't need them to context switch. I really don't need them to spend their time building chairs, buying the internet, that kind of stuff. If those things had all been in place, we could have accomplished everything on our list in those 3 days. Instead, we accomplished about 1/3 of our list in those 3 days. We never came back to that project again. We never accomplished the rest of the stuff on the list. The product never launched. There's still a splash page for it that exists that we occasionally get people emailing us and saying, hey, when is this thing going to launch? And we're like, when somebody decides to finish the other 2/3 of this list. But who knows what could have happened if someone had abstracted that away, if the chairs were there and the internet was working and we could have successfully completed everything on that list. So, as promised, a recap of the things that we talked about. Motivation. Know what motivates you and know what motivates the people on your team. Both as a project manager and as a developer working with other developers, knowing what motivates the people we're working with is really important. Because then we can use that motivation as a really giant lever to manipulate them into doing the things we want them to do. Recognize that it's okay for your process to change. And that sometimes a process that isn't the right fit for a team can really curb the motivation and the morale of that team. And that sometimes simple changes, like the change from minimum viable product to launch blockers, might seem like, who cares, can be really, really important and really change the morale of a team. And allow your process to change over time. Don't feel like, as the project manager, I have to come in here and define this process that we're going to use on a tablet that I then hand to every developer that comes into the project, and you've now got your big stone, but nothing that defines everything you're supposed to do, but nothing can change. Allow your process to change over time and adapt it to the people that currently make up that team. And when somebody leaves the team or when somebody joins the team, make sure you reevaluate the process so that it's fitting everyone on the team. That's my messages about motivation and process and such. If you would like to fill out a survey, you can go to this URL, or you can just go to the page on the conventions or on the conferences site for this session, and there's a survey there. I will also be hanging out up here for a little bit to answer questions. Otherwise, I'll be down at the Lullabot booth, and you can stop by and ask me questions there. Thanks for coming. I think we also have a few minutes left, so if people do have questions, I'm happy to answer them now as well. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
All right.
There's a mic, or you can just come up here and I can repeat it into the mic.
You go ahead, you first.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
All right, good. Needed some exercise to come back. So did you find any kind of productivity KPI metrics that kind of work for everybody, devs and PMs and executive management and whatnot? Like, how do we know we're being productive as a team? Like, produce an X
so the
amount of
question
work.
is, like, how do we measure productivity and know that the changes to our process have improved or decreased productivity of the team? For us, it's mostly just been kind of like gut feeling. We don't have any real metrics in terms of like graphs that show number of tickets completed over time or that. We've kind of based it off of, do we feel like we're accomplishing more? For the Drupalize Me team, anyways. We're a pretty small team, and that's worked for us. I think that you could, though, pretty easily, like a system like Unfuddle or GitHub allows you to see burn down charts for tickets that are accomplished. But that's not always a good measure either, because some tickets take 5 hours and some tickets take 30 hours. For us, it really was more of a being able to talk about our process from a bit more of a personal level and less of the numbers show X level. So far, it's an interesting question though, and I haven't yet looked into any sort of system for measuring that.
The reason I asked this is that our larger
Mm-hmm.
keep asking us, how do we trust that continuous producing equivalent of the
Yeah, I totally get that. So it's your client wants to know, if you change the process, how do we know that it's going to make things better? Or even what is the current rate of anything? Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer to that. As a developer, I could probably write the software to do it. As a project manager, I don't even know what the... Yeah.
Hi. Really good idea in terms of the shift from, doing kind of with randomly throwing something into Sprint to doing what the developers, kind of feel the most fulfillment from. Right now, we do it where for our sprints, we have an external client, and so we do what's dubbed like the most important items. Yep. I put kind of in air quotes.
High priority.
Yeah. So how would you suggest kind of approaching, that change? Sure. So for external clients, because it sounds like you have an internal client, right? Basically.
Yeah.
So what's the difference there?
And so in that scenario where you've got someone else that's kind of identifying the priority of tickets, you still do have a bucket of tickets. You've still got maybe 10 tickets that need to get accomplished. And you can at least start to figure out, is there a way that as a team we can make sure that those 10 tickets are getting assigned to the people that are the most interested in fixing them. If you've got 3 people on your team and 10 tickets, let those people choose of those 10 tickets which ones they're going to accomplish. You can limit it to say we have to get these ones done. Right. We actually did a lot of that initially, and it was a bit more of a process of, as a developer, but at the start of a sprint, spending some time in conversation with the project manager who would tell me, these are the things that I think we need to get done during this sprint. And I would say, of those things, these are the ones that I would kick ass at. These are the ones that would be fun for me. These are the ones that I'll do if I have to, but I don't really want to. Sometimes you have to do the things you don't want to, too, and that's fine. But if you can let people do the things they do want to, you're going to be better off.
Okay, so if I heard you correctly, basically, instead of trying to get which ones am I going to be the most productive at, it's more like which ones am I going to be the most motivated to do, and that kind of changes.
I think for me at least that helps. I'm going to be more productive at the things that I want to do. If I don't want to be changing this typo, I'm going to check Facebook instead.
Right. All right. Thanks a lot.
You bet.
Hi, Joe. Thanks very much for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
So the Drupalize Me team is all distributed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So how have you dealt with encouraging feedback on the process in that? Are people very upfront about saying this process is not working for me, or do you have you built-in structures for doing feedback between one-on-ones or 360 feedback or other forms of that? Thank you.
Yeah. So how do we, as a distributed team especially, how do we continue the conversation about process? We don't currently have a formal way of doing that. We do when we set our goals for each quarter, we have a call, or usually a couple of calls, where we kind of talk about what the goals are, and then within that, like, is this system still working for us? We also have team retreats, team retreats, and at our retreats, we always talk about process now, and just kind of is this working for everybody? Is this not working? The truth of it, though, is I think what we've discovered is people don't often recognize that it's the process that's blocking them, and that you need to get people to start talking about where their points of frustration are, or what's kind of painful for them right now, and then be able to identify that as a process problem. Like the minimum viable product thing for us was one of those, like, I had a lot of conversations with people basically being like, I'm really frustrated that I'm having to build something that is just the minimum. And, ultimately having the project manager recognize, if we just change this, that would make a big difference. And also Emma just yelled this out, whiskey, which really boils down to find opportunities to be in a social environment with your coworkers and talk about your process, and talk about, or not even process, talk about like your motivation and what's working and what isn't working. We don't yet have a formal way of reviewing that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's something we start to add down the road, but this is all still pretty new for us as well.
How would you characterize the line to draw between what a PM should abstract away versus what the developer should be able to either pick up or figure out, or would want to kind of do their own research, or how much of that, where do you draw that line between what they should provide and what they should kind of let the team do on their own?
Right, like when should the project manager put together the chairs, and when might I want to put together the chairs myself?
Yep.
That's a good question. I would say that, again, that's a little bit about kind of, as a project manager, understanding the things that motivate the people on your team, and knowing like that Joe finds recurring billing to be challenging, but he enjoys doing it because it challenges him and he enjoys challenging projects. And probably just remembering to talk to people about it too. Inevitably you're going to end up in a scenario where you can't abstract things away if you don't know what needs to be abstracted. So I would say, as the project manager, trying to make sure that you have an open line of communication for people to identify to you, these are the things that are blocking me or are frustrating because I have to do them and I don't feel like I'm productive when I'm doing them, would be a good place to start.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, Joe. Great talk today. I learned a lot. Thank you. Just so quick question. As a project manager, how do you balance sort of the business, budgets versus allowing your developers to kind of pick and choose what they want to do? I mean, as a PM, we all want to do great work. We want quality work. We want our team to be happy. But many times, if you're working, under a fixed price or a budget constraint, it's not, it's for an external client. You may not have the luxury of allowing people to pick what they want and do much more than the minimum. As a team, or as sort of the developer side of things, how do you kind of either explain that or work in that constraint? And maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
I think maybe that goes back to the question that was asked earlier about, like, if the client has said these 10 things are high priority, how do you make sure that those 10 things get done? And also recognizing that, like, this is the process that works for us in our unique situation, and it's going to be different for everybody. But ultimately, anything that you can do to facilitate allowing people to work on the things that are exciting for them is going to help. All of us are adults too, though, so we're going to recognize, this month I just have to work on the stupid stuff because it needs to get done. Remembering that, if I know that you as a project manager are interested in assigning the things that I want to work on to me, just knowing that you're going to do that when they come up is really motivating too, because there might not always be things that are interesting or that you can assign to me right now. But any chance you get to assign something to someone and say, I really know that Joe would kick ass at this and have fun with it, take that opportunity, and it improves all of those things. It's kind of, so maybe like a trimmed down version of it, but whenever you can, allowing yourself to recognize the things that motivate the people you're working with and feeding that.
Great. Thank you.
All right, I am totally out of time now, but thank you guys for coming. If you have more questions, I'll be down at the Lullabot booth for a bit after this. Oh no, you did what I did. I'm like, I gotta put my phone somewhere other than my pocket.